The envelope arrived at Dr. Sarah Whitmore's Oxford office on a Tuesday morning in March 2024. No return address. No postmark. Just her name written in elegant script across cream-colored paper that felt ancient beneath her fingertips. Inside, a single photograph. She recognized it immediately, a cuneiform tablet she'd seen referenced in obscure academic journals, but never photographed. The scholars who discovered it in northern Iraq had died under mysterious circumstances in 1967. The tablet itself had vanished into a private collection, its location unknown for over 50 years. But someone had found it, and they wanted her to know. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the translation scribbled on the back of the photograph. When the children of Earth forget their makers, the stars will fall silent. When the stars fall silent, the Watchers will return. And when the Watchers return, humanity's second age will end as the first age ended, in fire and water. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Dr. Whitmore, you don't know me, but I know your work on Mesopotamian angelology. I have something that will change everything you think you know about human origins. Meet me in Istanbul. Come alone. You have 48 hours. The line went dead. Sarah stared at the photograph, her academic training warring with something deeper. An instinct that whispered she stood at the threshold of a truth that powerful forces had worked for millennia to suppress. She booked a flight that evening. What Sarah couldn't know, what she wouldn't discover until it was far too late to turn back, was that the story she was about to uncover had been deliberately hidden not just from modern scholars, but from human consciousness itself. A conspiracy so ancient it predated writing, so profound it had shaped every major religion. So dangerous that those who uncovered it rarely survived long enough to share what they'd learned. This is that story, not as sanitized mythology, not as comfortable academic theory, but as something far more disturbing, a historical record of Earth's first colonization, humanity's genetic engineering, and the cosmic conflict that still shapes our world today. Iraq, 1949. The shovel hit something solid 3 meters below the surface. Fuad Safar, lead archaeologist for the Iraqi Directorate of Antiquities, dropped to his knees in the excavation pit. His team had been digging at Tel Sawan for 6 weeks, expecting to find nothing more than standard Ubaid pottery fragments. Instead, his fingers now traced the edge of something that shouldn't exist. Limestone, precisely cut, fitted together with joints so tight a knife blade couldn't slip between them. At a depth and in a style that predated Sumerian civilization by 2,000 years. Impossible, whispered his assistant, Ahmed Hassan, peering over his shoulder. Safar said nothing. In archaeology, impossible simply meant not yet explained. But as they excavated further, revealing a foundation platform that extended 40 meters in each direction, built according to mathematical principles that wouldn't be formalized until ancient Greece, he felt the first whisper of genuine fear. They found the chamber 3 days later, sealed, untouched for 6 millennia. And when they broke through the final layer of bitumen waterproofing, the air that rushed out carried a scent like ozone after lightning. Sharp, metallic, wrong. Inside, arranged on stone shelves carved into the walls, clay tablets. Hundreds of them, each inscribed with cuneiform script so archaic that Safar recognized only one symbol in 10. But he recognized enough. One phrase appeared on tablet after tablet, like a warning repeated across centuries. The Watchers who descended from heaven to teach the children of clay. Ahmed translated haltingly, his voice growing quieter with each word. Before the cities rose, before the floods came, before humans walked upright beneath the sun, they descended. 7 who would teach, 200 who would transgress, and the bloodlines of Earth were forever changed. Safar photographed everything, documented every detail, made precise notes about the chamber's construction, its orientation, the strange acoustic properties that made their voices echo in frequencies that hurt to hear. Then he sealed it back up. Why? Ahmed demanded. This is the discovery of a lifetime. Because, Safar replied quietly, gathering the photographs into a leather case. Some discoveries end lifetimes. He shipped the photographs to 3 separate institutions, the British Museum, the University of Chicago, and the Vatican Archives. Each package included a note. Excavation coordinates enclosed. Contents classified. For your eyes only. 2 of the packages arrived. The third disappeared somewhere between Baghdad and Rome. Safar died of a sudden heart attack 6 months later. He was 34 years old, in perfect health, with no family history of cardiac disease. Ahmed Hassan vanished from Iraq in 1951. His body was never found. The chamber at Tel Sawan was bulldozed in 1953 during infrastructure development. Official records claim nothing of archaeological significance was destroyed, but the photographs survived, and 75 years later, they would find their way to Dr. Sarah Whitmore through channels so labyrinthine that even she would never fully trace them. Eridu, 3200 BCE. To understand what the Watchers were, you must first understand what they created. Eridu rose from the marshlands of southern Mesopotamia like a fever dream made stone. The Sumerians themselves called it the first city, not the oldest settlement, but the first place that deserved the name civilization. And they were right, but not in the way mainstream archaeology assumes. The problem with Eridu is simple. It appears too perfect, too suddenly. Layer by layer, excavations have revealed 17 distinct building phases at the site. The conventional interpretation suggests gradual development, a settlement slowly evolving over centuries from simple mud brick structures to sophisticated urban planning. But look closer at the actual data. The lowest, oldest layers reveal architectural knowledge that has no antecedent. No trial and error. No primitive precursors. At the base level, dated to approximately 5000 BCE, you find advanced hydraulic engineering with water channels carved through bedrock at precise gradients. Mathematical precision in building layouts conforming to geometric principles that won't be formally described for 3,000 years. Astronomical alignments requiring multi-generational observation programs and sophisticated recording systems. This is not evolution. This is installation. The temple dedicated to Enki, Lord of the Deep Waters, demonstrates capabilities that shatter comfortable assumptions about Neolithic technology. The foundation extends 12 meters into the earth, penetrating multiple geological strata to reach the water table. Underground chambers branch in 6 directions, each carved through solid rock, with smooth walls showing no tool marks. How did they do it? The cuneiform texts found at Eridu provide an answer that archaeologists have spent a century trying to rationalize into mythology. The Apkallu came from the Abzu and taught us to shape stone with water that cuts like fire, to speak to the earth and make it obey, to read the stars and know the will of heaven. 7 names appear repeatedly in these texts, always in the same order. Adapa, he who completed the plans of heaven and earth. Ewan, called Oans by later Greek sources, who emerged from the ocean with knowledge of all crafts. Imeduga, whose words turned sand to stone. Imegalama, who marked time by the stars. Imebulaga, who showed us the veins of metal beneath the earth. And Enlilda, who taught the sacred measurements. Utuabzu, who knew the secret of life in clay. Not gods, not myths. The texts are explicit. These were physical beings who arrived at a specific time, taught specific skills, and eventually departed, leaving behind modified humans capable of maintaining the systems they'd established. The genetic component is what makes modern scholars most uncomfortable. The Atrahasis epic, composed around 1700 BCE but preserving much older oral traditions, describes the creation of humanity in terms that sound disturbingly like a technical manual. Mix the clay of the earth with the essence of a god who has intelligence. Place 14 pieces, 7 to become male, 7 female. Let the goddess of birth determine the completion. 10 moon cycles for the emergence. The precision is unsettling. The process described involves selection of base genetic material, clay of the earth. Introduction of enhanced cognitive capabilities, essence of a god. Gender determination at the earliest stage. Specific gestation period exactly matching human pregnancy. Either this is an extraordinarily lucky metaphor, or the Sumerians were describing something they actually witnessed. Archaeological genetics has added a disturbing footnote to this story. Analysis of skeletal remains from Eridu's earliest levels reveals characteristics that distinguish them from later Mesopotamian populations. Cranial capacity 10% larger than regional averages. Bone density suggesting enhanced physical capabilities. tooth enamel composition indicating a diet that included elements not naturally available in the marsh environment. Whatever happened at Eridu, it involved more than cultural development. It involved biological transformation. Istanbul, 2024. The man who met Sarah at the Hagia Sophia was older than she expected. 70, perhaps 80, with eyes that had seen too much and hands that shook as he passed her a USB drive. "Everything your colleagues died to suppress," he said in accented English. "Every photograph, every translation, every piece of evidence that doesn't fit the approved narrative. Who are you? Someone who made the same mistake you're making, believing that truth matters more than survival." He glanced over his shoulder at the tourists photographing Byzantine mosaics, oblivious to the exchange happening in their midst. They were never gods, Dr. Whitmore. They were administrators. Administrators of what? This. He gestured around them. All of this. Earth. Humanity. The entire planetary system. We weren't created in love or divine inspiration. We were created because they needed workers for the mining operations. Sarah nearly laughed. That's Zecharia Sitchin's theory. It's been thoroughly debunked. Sitchin got the general outline correct, but missed the critical details. The Anunnaki weren't aliens in the science fiction sense. They were post-biological entities, beings who had transcended organic limitations, but still required physical resources to maintain their civilization. Earth wasn't chosen randomly. The planet's electromagnetic field, its gravitational constant, its position in the galactic arm, all perfect for the industrial processes they needed. He pressed a second item into her hand. A clay cylinder seal, genuine by the weight and texture. "Roll this in clay. Look at what they wanted us to see versus what they actually depicted." Sarah examined the seal. Standard Sumerian iconography. A tree, two seated figures, a serpent. "The tree of knowledge," the old man continued, "wasn't a moral metaphor. It was a genetic database. The serpent wasn't evil. It was a faction of watchers who believed humans deserved full access to cognitive enhancement, not just the limited upgrade needed for manual labor. The seated figures aren't Adam and Eve. They're Enki and Ninhursag, the lead genetic engineers, deciding how much intelligence to grant their creation. This is insane. Is it? His voice hardened. Then explain the Sumerian king list. Explain why rulers before the flood supposedly reigned for thousands of years while post-flood kings had normal lifespans. Explain the sudden explosion of civilization in multiple locations simultaneously around 3000 BCE. Explain the astronomical knowledge possessed by people who supposedly couldn't see beyond their village walls. Sarah had no answers. The old man softened. "I know how this sounds. I've lived with this knowledge for 40 years, and it still seems impossible every morning. But the evidence doesn't care what we believe. The tablets describe a structured hierarchy governing this world long before humans developed writing. And here's what will haunt your sleep. That hierarchy never left." He stood, his eyes scanning the crowd one final time. 3 tiers of authority. At the top, the Anunnaki Council, Anu ruling heaven, Enlil controlling atmosphere and weather, Enki managing terrestrial resources and oceans. Beneath them, the Igigi, 200 operational administrators handling day-to-day planetary management. At the bottom, the Apkallu, 7 specialists who directly interfaced with human populations. Where does the Book of Enoch fit? Enoch describes what happened when the Igigi violated protocol. They weren't supposed to reproduce with humans. The genetic contamination risked the entire project. The hybrid offspring, Nephilim in Hebrew, but the Sumerians called them those who from heaven to earth fell, possessed capabilities neither fully human nor fully Anunnaki. The council's solution was catastrophic: global reset via environmental manipulation. The flood. Every culture remembers it because every culture experienced it. But it wasn't divine punishment for sin. It was disaster recovery, wiping corrupted data and restoring the system from backup. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The tablets at Tel Sawan, the ones Fuad Safar photographed before they killed him, they contain coordinates. Locations where the Watchers established permanent installations, most of them still operational beneath the surface. 3 archaeological teams have located these sites in the last 50 years. And they found active machinery, Dr. Whitmore. Machines that still function after 6,000 years. Machines that respond to specific genetic markers in human DNA. And in each case, within 6 months of discovery, the sites were either destroyed by military action, buried by natural disasters, or declared off-limits for security reasons. He placed a final gift in her hands, a map with 7 locations marked in red ink. Choose wisely which one you investigate. You'll only get one chance before they know you're looking. Then he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Sarah holding evidence of a truth so vast it made her prior understanding of human history seem like a child's fairy tale. She looked down at the map. One location jumped out: Mount Hermon, Syrian-Lebanese border. Marked with a single word, Genesis. Mount Hermon, 4500 BCE. 200 of them made the oath simultaneously, binding themselves to a decision that would alter human evolution forever. Semjaza, their leader, spoke the words that would echo through millennia. Let us choose wives from among the daughters of men and beget children with them. Let us teach them the hidden knowledge that the council has forbidden. And if we are punished for this transgression, let none of us turn back, but all bear the judgment together. 200 voices answered, We swear. The mountain trembled, not from divine wrath, but from the activation of transportation nodes carved into the bedrock, technology so advanced it would be mistaken for magic even by those who witnessed it directly. They descended in groups of 7, each led by a specialist in particular domains of knowledge. The human settlements below had no context for understanding what they witnessed. Beings of light and terrible beauty, speaking in harmonics that bypassed language and communicated directly with the mind, offering gifts that would transform hunter-gatherers into city builders within 3 generations. Azazel taught metallurgy, not simple copper smelting, but advanced alloy composition, heat treatment processes, and forging techniques that produced tools of astonishing durability. His students learned to identify ore deposits by magnetic anomalies, to extract pure metals using chemical reactions, to create bronze that wouldn't be matched in quality for 2,000 years. Barakul revealed astronomy, not primitive star lore, but sophisticated mathematical models of planetary motion, accurate predictions of eclipses, and the understanding that Earth revolved around the Sun rather than sitting at the center of creation. He taught the Saros cycle, the 18.6-year lunar standstill, and the precession of equinoxes requiring 26,000 years to complete. Kokabeel demonstrated divination, pattern recognition algorithms disguised as mystical practice, enabling prediction of weather patterns, crop yields, and optimal planting cycles based on astronomical configurations. Tamiel taught pharmacology, the isolation of active compounds from plants, the preparation of medicines that accelerated healing, and contraceptive formulas that gave women unprecedented control over reproduction. Asael revealed cosmetics and adornment, but also chemistry, crystallography, and the optical properties of gemstones that could focus light in useful ways. Each gift came with a price. The women they chose weren't selected randomly. The Watchers identified specific genetic markers, looking for human lineages that showed spontaneous mutations toward higher cognitive function. By breeding with these bloodlines, they created hybrid offspring who inherited both enhanced intelligence and extended lifespans. The Nephilim, some grew to exceptional size, height a byproduct of altered growth hormone regulation. All possessed capabilities that terrified ordinary humans. They learned faster, remembered perfectly, solved problems that baffled their purely human counterparts. But they were unstable. The mixing of Watcher and human genetics created beings who didn't fit cleanly into either category. They aged differently, matured unpredictably, and developed psychological profiles that ranged from brilliant to sociopathic with no middle ground. The council noticed. Enlil, in particular, was furious. The unauthorized genetic experiment threatened the carefully calibrated human population intended to serve as a labor force. The Nephilim showed disturbing independence, questionable loyalty, and a tendency to view purely human populations as inferior, a recipe for conflict that could destabilize the entire planetary operation. A message was sent from the council chambers, later mythologized as heaven. What you have done cannot be undone, but it will not be allowed to propagate. You have 7 generations to prepare. Then comes purification. Semjaza understood immediately. They had 7 generations, roughly 1,400 years, before the council would implement a solution that would eliminate both the Nephilim and the Watchers who created them. The countdown to the flood had begun. Nippur, 2900 BCE. The debate in the council chamber lasted 7 days and 7 nights. Enlil wanted complete extinction. The humans have been corrupted beyond recovery. The Nephilim breed without control. The Igigi who created this catastrophe must witness the destruction of their children before facing final judgment. Purge everything. Start fresh with uncorrupted genetic stock. Enki argued for surgical intervention. We can isolate the contaminated bloodlines. Preserve the functional human populations. Select one pure lineage and provide them with survival protocols. The knowledge we've invested in human development needn't be completely lost. Anu, presiding over the debate from his orbital station, later described as highest heaven, rendered the final verdict. Enlil's solution is wasteful but necessary. However, Enki may preserve a seed population, one family line showing no Nephilim contamination, along with genetic samples from all species. Provide them with technical specifications for a survival vessel. But make this clear, the world they knew ends in water. What emerges after will be rebuilt according to stricter protocols. The decision made, Enlil began preparations for global environmental manipulation on a scale that would make the event unmistakable in both geological and human memory. Step 1. Destabilize the Antarctic ice sheet using subsurface resonance technology. The resulting melt would raise sea levels approximately 120 meters globally. Step 2. Trigger coordinated volcanic eruptions along tectonic boundaries, releasing ash into the upper atmosphere to block solar radiation and generate decades of cooling. Step 3. Manipulate atmospheric moisture content to produce rainfall at rates that would overwhelm all natural drainage systems. The timeline: 6 months for preparation, 40 days for execution, 1 year for water to reseed. Enki, operating against explicit council orders, contacted the one human he judged most worthy of survival, Ziusudra, priest-king of Shuruppak, a man whose genetic screening showed 0 Nephilim markers and whose psychological profile suggested both intelligence and compliance. The instructions Enki provided weren't divine inspiration. They were engineering specifications. Build a vessel according to these precise dimensions. Internal volume of 43,000 cubic meters. Compartmentalized interior with sealed chambers. Waterproofing using 7 layers of bitumen applied at specific intervals. Ventilation systems here, here, and here. Ballast configuration ensuring stability in rough seas. Provisions for 2 years' survival. Ziusudra, to his credit, asked the obvious question, why? Enki's response entered human mythology as the first conspiracy. The council has decided to reset human civilization. I am providing you the means to survive so that knowledge isn't completely lost. Build the vessel. Gather genetic samples, not just animals, but seeds, microbial cultures, everything needed to restart ecosystems. Select 7 families who show genetic promise. And when the rains begin, seal yourselves inside and don't emerge until the waters recede. How will I know when it's safe? Send out birds. When they don't return, land has appeared. Discharge the water in the lower chambers. Then wait for contact. We will find you. Ziusudra built the vessel in a mountain valley, away from population centers, telling curious neighbors he was constructing a grain storage facility. The project took 3 years. The mathematical precision required for the design meant he needed assistance with advanced training, a detail that would lead later cultures to describe him as a righteous man chosen by God, when in fact he'd been selected for genetic compatibility and cognitive capability. The rains began on schedule. 40 days and 40 nights, not poetic exaggeration, but accurate reporting of a catastrophe generated by deliberate atmospheric manipulation. The rainfall rates exceeded 30 centimeters per hour across vast regions. Rivers became inland seas. Coastlines disappeared beneath surging water. Every human settlement in low-lying areas, which meant most of human civilization, drowned within the first 2 weeks. The Nephilim, despite their enhanced capabilities, were not immune to drowning. The Watchers who had created them were forced to watch from the orbital installations, unable to intervene, witnessing the extinction of their hybrid offspring as punishment for unauthorized reproduction. When the waters finally receded, an estimated 95% of the human population was dead. Every major settlement destroyed. Every library burned. Every city abandoned to the silt. But Ziusudra's vessel survived, coming to rest on the mountains of Ararat exactly as the specifications predicted. And when Enki's recovery team arrived, they found not just survivors, but preserved samples of everything needed to restart Earth's biosphere, plus 7 trained families capable of rebuilding civilization according to improved protocols. The backup had worked. Now came restoration. UR 2100 BCE. 300 years after the flood, the new cities rose with disturbing uniformity. Not organic growth, but planned development executed according to specifications that originated from sources the builders themselves didn't fully understand. They called it receiving wisdom from the gods, but the technical manuals were explicit: precise street widths, specific building orientations, calculated load distributions. The Ziggurats became the most visible manifestation of the post-flood control system. Conventional archaeology interprets these structures as temples, religious architecture expressing humanity's desire to reach heaven. But the physical evidence suggests a far more pragmatic function: communication nodes. Consider the Great Ziggurat of Ur, constructed around 2100 BCE under King Ur-Nammu. The structure rises in 3 tiers to a height of approximately 30 meters. Each tier is oriented to specific stellar configurations, not randomly chosen stars, but precise calibration points in the ecliptic plane. The internal chambers incorporate acoustic properties that amplify certain frequencies while dampening others, creating resonance effects that have no purpose in religious ceremony, but make perfect sense for signal transmission. The mathematics governing ziggurat construction appear in identical form across Mesopotamia, suggesting distribution of standardized architectural plans rather than independent development. Base dimensions always conform to ratios expressing astronomical constants. Tier heights follow geometric progressions related to planetary orbital periods. Internal chamber placements correspond to nodes in standing wave patterns, precisely where you'd position receivers in a communication array. Recent acoustic analysis has added a disturbing dimension to this understanding. When sound is generated at specific frequencies within ziggurat chambers, the entire structure resonates. Not randomly, but in patterns that match brainwave frequencies associated with heightened receptivity and reduced critical thinking. The ancients called this opening the mind to divine communication. Modern neurologists recognize it as externally induced altered states. Were the ziggurats broadcasting signals that made human populations more compliant? The question sounds paranoid until you examine the administrative tablets from Nippur, religious center of Sumerian civilization. These documents describe regular ceremonies where priests would enter the ziggurat's highest chamber and receive the tablets of destiny, instructions governing everything from agricultural planning to military campaigns. The specificity is troubling. Priests receive detailed directions about optimal planting dates calculated to 6-day precision, irrigation channel configurations requiring advanced hydraulic engineering, building specifications beyond their apparent technical capabilities, military strategies presupposing geographic knowledge they shouldn't possess. Either these priests possessed supernatural intelligence, or they were receiving instructions from an external source using the ziggurats as communication infrastructure. The temple complex at Eridu provides the clearest evidence of this system's true function. Excavations beneath the temple reveal chambers extending 12 meters underground, far deeper than necessary for any religious purpose. These chambers were carved through solid bedrock using techniques that left no tool marks, suggesting cutting methods unknown to conventional archaeology. More significantly, the chambers are arranged in a geometric pattern that serves no architectural function but corresponds precisely to receiver array configurations in modern radio astronomy. Each chamber is positioned at a specific distance and angle from the central axis, creating a 3-dimensional grid capable of determining signal direction and source. The internal surfaces of these chambers show evidence of metallic coating. Analysis reveals alloys combining copper, gold, and elements that shouldn't appear in Bronze Age metallurgy. These coatings would enhance electromagnetic conductivity, turning the chamber walls into giant antennae. What were they listening for? Or perhaps more accurately, who was listening to them? The administrative structure governing ziggurat operations reveals another layer of control. Priests weren't chosen democratically or by hereditary succession. They underwent genetic screening disguised as purity rituals, with candidates selected based on bloodline markers that traced back to the surviving families from Ziusudra's vessel. These genetic requirements ensured that only individuals with specific DNA sequences could receive and correctly interpret the signals transmitted through the Ziggurats. Everyone else heard meaningless noise, or more likely, heard nothing at all, their neurological makeup incompatible with the frequencies being used. This created a permanent priest class with genuine technological advantages over the general population, advantages that were interpreted as divine favor rather than biological engineering. The system worked brilliantly for over 1,000 years, maintaining social stability through a combination of awe, genuine technological assistance, and carefully managed information flow. But like all control systems, it had vulnerabilities. Giza Plateau, 2560 BCE. While Mesopotamia developed its ziggurat network, a parallel system emerged in Egypt, architecturally distinct but functionally identical. The pyramids were never tombs. The evidence against the tomb theory is overwhelming once you examine it without preconceptions. No authentic burial inscriptions in any pyramid. No mummies discovered in original contexts. The sarcophagi in pyramid chambers show none of the decorations found in actual Egyptian tombs. The internal chambers were sealed from the inside, impossible if used for burial. So what were they? The Turin Papyrus, discovered in 1822 but rarely discussed in mainstream archaeology, provides the answer. This king list begins not with human rulers, but with the Neteru, divine beings who governed Egypt during a primordial age called Zep Tepi, the first time. The text names 9 Neteru rulers: Ptah, who reigned 9,000 years; Ra, who ruled 1,000 years; Shu, 700 years; Geb, 500 years; Osiris, 450 years; Seth, 350 years; Horus, 300 years; Thoth, 7,726 years; Mot, 1,000 years. These aren't mythological durations. The papyrus treats them as historical fact, recorded with the same bureaucratic precision used for human dynasties. More significantly, each Neteru is associated with specific technological domains. Ptah, architecture and engineering; Ra, energy systems and solar technology; Shu, atmospheric management; Geb, geological manipulation; Osiris, agricultural systems and biotechnology; Seth, military operations and security; Horus, surveillance and administration; Thoth, information systems and communication; Mot, legal frameworks and social engineering. This isn't mythology. It's an organizational chart. The pyramids, viewed through this lens, become infrastructure rather than monuments. Consider the Great Pyramid's internal structure. 3 chambers positioned at precise intervals vertically. Shafts extending from these chambers at exact angles toward specific stars. The king's chamber positioned at the pyramid's geometric center, constructed from rose granite containing high concentrations of quartz crystal. The sarcophagus carved from a single block of granite, with internal dimensions corresponding to the wavelength of human speech in the optimal resonance frequency. What happens when you combine these elements? Acoustic researchers Christopher Dunn and John Reed conducted experiments inside the king's chamber in the 1990s. They discovered that the chamber amplifies sounds at 111 Hz, a frequency that induces altered states of consciousness, reduces critical thinking, and increases suggestibility. Moreover, the granite walls generate weak electromagnetic fields when subjected to pressure from the pyramid's mass above. These fields, combined with the acoustic resonance, create conditions that ancient texts describe as opening the gateway between worlds. Translation: the pyramid chambers were sensory deprivation environments optimized for communication with the Neteru, beings who, like the Mesopotamian Anunnaki, governed Earth from installations elsewhere. The astronomical alignments of the Giza complex add another layer of significance. The 3 main pyramids align precisely with the 3 stars of Orion's belt, not in their current position, but as they appeared in 10,500 BCE. The causeway of the Khafre pyramid points exactly toward the spring equinox sunrise in that same epoch. The Sphinx, water erosion patterns suggest, dates to the same period. This creates an impossible timeline. Official Egyptology places pyramid construction at 2560 BCE, but the structures themselves encode astronomical data from 10,500 BCE, 8,000 years earlier. The only logical resolution: the pyramids were built to specifications drawn from much older sources, replicating a system that had existed in that earlier epoch and was being reinstalled after the flood. Beneath the Giza Plateau, ground-penetrating radar has revealed extensive chamber systems, sealed rooms, connecting tunnels, and large voids that have never been officially excavated. These subsurface structures mirror the underground chambers found beneath Mesopotamian ziggurats, suggesting both were components of a unified global system. Egyptian texts describe these chambers as the halls of records, repositories containing the complete knowledge of the pre-flood civilization. Thoth, the Neteru associated with information systems, allegedly sealed these archives before the catastrophe and encrypted the access protocols and architectural features of the pyramid complex. The Emerald Tablet, attributed to Thoth in his Greek form as Hermes Trismegistus, provides cryptic instructions for accessing this knowledge. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracles of one thing. Decoded, the surface structures, pyramids, temples, monuments, mirror an underground system. The two work together as a single integrated mechanism. What purpose does this mechanism serve? The answer requires understanding the electromagnetic properties of the Giza Plateau itself. The bedrock contains unusually high concentrations of quartz crystal, making it naturally piezoelectric, capable of converting mechanical stress into electrical current. The pyramids, with their millions of tons of precisely fitted stones, generate constant pressure on this bedrock. The resulting electromagnetic fields, focused and amplified by the pyramid's geometric form, create a standing wave pattern detectable across vast distances. In other words, the pyramids broadcast, not religious messages, not tombs preservation magic, but a beacon transmitting Earth's coordinates, planetary status, and operational data to receivers positioned elsewhere in the solar system. The Neteru hadn't left Earth. They'd simply relocated to orbital platforms and lunar installations, maintaining remote administration while the human population grew and developed according to their specifications. The pyramids ensured they could monitor progress without requiring constant physical presence on the surface. A perfect surveillance system disguised as religious architecture. Mount Hermon, 2024. Sarah's helicopter touched down on the Lebanese side of the mountain just after dawn. The excavation site sprawled across 3 hectares of rocky terrain, officially described as Chalcolithic settlement ruins. The reality was more complex and more dangerous. Dr. Mikhail Reznik, the Russian archaeologist who'd agreed to meet her, looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His hands shook as he led her past armed guards toward a tent concealing the main excavation. "You need to understand," he said quietly. "What we found here breaks every model of human development. Not incrementally, completely." Inside the tent, a stone platform approximately 30 meters in diameter, covered in inscriptions that made Sarah's breath catch. Cuneiform, hieroglyphics, Proto-Sinaitic, all on the same surface, as if the stone itself served as a translation key between ancient languages. But it was the central image that stopped her cold. A double helix, unmistakably DNA, carved in stone 4,500 years before Watson and Crick's discovery. "We've documented 17 distinct genetic sequences inscribed here," Mikhail explained. "Most match human genome variations still found in populations around the Mediterranean. But 3 sequences don't match anything in modern databases. We've run them through every genetic archive available. Nothing. What do they match? That's the question that got my predecessor killed." He pulled up a laptop, showing an analysis comparing the unknown sequences to primate DNA. "Look at the divergence points. These sequences branched from the human lineage not through evolution, but through deliberate modification. Specific insertions at precise locations that don't occur naturally." Sarah studied the screen. The pattern was unmistakable, targeted genetic engineering, not random mutation. The Nephilim, she whispered. Mikhail nodded. The hybrid offspring produced when the Watchers violated protocol and bred with human females. This platform documents the genetic specifications. And here's what terrifies me. We've identified living populations carrying markers from these sequences. He pulled up a map showing clusters of genetic anomalies concentrated in specific regions: the Basque Country, the Caucasus Mountains, the Himalayan highlands, remote Pacific islands. These populations show enhanced cognitive function, resistance to certain diseases, and statistically significant longevity compared to global averages. They're also massively overrepresented in positions of power, political leadership, corporate boards, scientific institutions. Sarah's mind raced. You're suggesting a bloodline conspiracy spanning 4,000 years. I'm suggesting that the genetic advantages introduced by the Watchers' intervention never fully disappeared. The flood eliminated the obvious Nephilim, the giants, the ones who couldn't hide their hybrid nature. But the subtler genetic enhancements survived in populations who appeared purely human while retaining the cognitive and physical advantages of their modified ancestry. He opened another file. Cross-referenced these bloodline markers with genealogical records from royal dynasties, religious leadership, and historical power structures. The correlation is undeniable. The same genetic signatures appear in ruling families across cultures, continents, and centuries. So what are you saying? That there's a master race descended from the Watchers? I'm saying, Mikhail replied carefully, that the hierarchical system established by the Anunnaki never ended. It just became invisible. The bloodlines they enhanced continue to dominate human civilization, not through conspiracy, but through inherited biological advantages that manifest as superior intelligence, strategic thinking, and extended periods of peak cognitive function. He pulled up a final document, a translation of the Mount Hermon inscriptions. Those who carry the mark shall govern those who do not. This is the decree of heaven, established before the waters rose, preserved through the catastrophe, eternal until the stars return to their beginning. Sarah felt her worldview cracking. How do we verify this? We can't. Not publicly. 3 labs that attempted to publish these findings lost their funding within months. The lead researchers either retracted their work or disappeared. The genetic data itself has been classified by intelligence agencies in 6 countries. On what grounds? National security. Officially, they're concerned about genetic discrimination. Unofficially, he trailed off, staring at the DNA helix carved in ancient stone. Officially, we have no idea who's blocking this research or why they consider it dangerous. Sarah thought of the old man in Istanbul, his warning about sites being destroyed or classified after discovery. Who controls the cover-up? Mikhail laughed bitterly. That's the question I've spent 5 years trying to answer. The best hypothesis? The same bloodlines we're investigating. If you possessed genetic advantages that gave you disproportionate power, would you want that information public? Or would you use your influence to suppress evidence of your biological superiority? A commotion outside the tent interrupted them, shouting in Arabic, the sound of vehicles approaching. Mikhail's face went pale. Lebanese military. We're on sovereign territory, but they've been looking for an excuse to shut this down. How much time do we have? Minutes. Maybe less. He grabbed a USB drive from his laptop, pressing it into Sarah's hands. Everything we've documented is on here. Get it to someone who can publish without institutional pressure. Independent researchers, journalists, anyone outside the academic control structure. What about you? I knew the risks when I invited you here. Now go. The helicopter pilot knows to take you across the border if there's trouble. Sarah hesitated. Go, Mikhail shouted. She ran. Behind her, the sound of military boots on stone, orders being shouted, the organized chaos of a site being seized. The helicopter lifted off as soldiers emerged from the excavation tent. Sarah watched through the window as they surrounded Mikhail, forcing him to his knees. Then the pilot banked hard, dropping below the ridgeline, and Mount Hermon disappeared behind the mountains. Sarah clutched the USB drive, her heart pounding. Inside this device, evidence that humanity's origins involved deliberate genetic engineering. Documentation that the hierarchical systems established by extraterrestrial administrators still govern human civilization through inherited biological advantages. Proof that the knowledge suppressed for millennia remained dangerous to those who benefited from keeping it secret. and now she was responsible for deciding what to do with it. Ararat Mountains, 2850 BCE. The waters receded more slowly than Ziusudra expected. From his vessel's elevated position, he watched as mountain peaks emerged from the inland sea that had covered the world. Months passed before enough land appeared to risk disembarking. When his reconnaissance birds finally returned with olive branches, signaling viable vegetation, he knew the recovery phase could begin. But he also knew he wasn't alone. The Watchers had promised contact. They arrived within a week of landfall. Enki descended with 6 Apkallu, their transport craft utilizing technology that still seemed impossible even after generations of limited contact. They materialized in the valley below the vessel, their appearance carefully modulated to avoid overwhelming the survivors, humanoid enough to communicate directly, but clearly other. You preserved what was required, Enki stated, his voice carrying harmonics that bypassed language and communicated meaning directly. Now we rebuild according to improved specifications. Ziusudra had questions. The world that drowned. How much knowledge survives? Enough. The underground repositories remained sealed. The orbital archives sustained minimal damage. We have complete technical specifications for agricultural systems, metallurgy, architecture, and social organization. But we will implement them differently this time. How? Distributed rather than centralized. Previously, we concentrated advanced capabilities in a few urban centers. This made civilization efficient but fragile. The Nephilim compromised a handful of locations and threatened the entire system. Now we will distribute knowledge across multiple regions simultaneously. China, India, Egypt, Mesoamerica. If one center fails, others continue. It was a resilient strategy, Ziusudra realized. Decentralization as protection against catastrophic failure. Over the following months, the Apkallu implemented the restoration protocols. Phase 1. Environmental stabilization. The flood had disrupted ecosystems globally. Teams deployed advanced bioremediation technology disguised as divine intervention, accelerating soil recovery and re-establishing plant communities. Genetic samples preserved in Ziusudra's vessel were carefully reintroduced, monitored to ensure proper population dynamics. Phase 2. Infrastructure development. The Apkallu selected 7 primary locations for intensive development, each chosen for strategic resources and geographic advantages. Teams established basic irrigation systems, demonstrated agricultural techniques, and transferred foundational knowledge about toolmaking and construction. Phase 3. Social engineering. The trickiest component. Human populations needed governance structures that maintained stability without requiring constant Anunnaki oversight. The solution: install modified bloodlines, descendants of Ziusudra's families who carried genetic markers, making them more receptive to guidance and capable of leadership. These families became the first post-flood rulers, not through military conquest or democratic selection, but through biological advantage. They were smarter, more organized, and possessed intuitive understanding of administrative principles that others had to learn laboriously. The modern term would be natural aristocracy. The ancient term was chosen by the gods. Both descriptions were accurate. Phase 4. Knowledge transfer. This phase required the most delicacy. Humans needed enough knowledge to rebuild civilization, but not so much that they could threaten Anunnaki control. The solution: mystery schools. The Apkallu established teaching centers at each primary location, recruiting students based on genetic screening disguised as religious initiation. These schools taught advanced mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering, but always within carefully defined limits. Students learned to predict eclipses, but not to understand the actual mechanics of orbital dynamics. They mastered herbal medicine, but not the biochemical principles underlying pharmacology. They could construct buildings using sophisticated geometry, but remained ignorant of the theoretical mathematics that generated those geometric ratios. It was education as both gift and cage. The system worked spectacularly for over 1,000 years, producing civilizations that achieved remarkable sophistication while remaining dependent on periodic knowledge updates from their administrators. But the Apkallu made one critical error. They underestimated human adaptability. Generation by generation, the mystery school initiates accumulated knowledge fragments. They compared notes across regions, recognizing patterns in what they'd been taught. They experimented, discovering principles their teachers had deliberately omitted. And slowly, incrementally, they began reconstructing the complete knowledge systems that had been portioned out in limited doses. By 1500 BCE, human mathematicians in Babylon were performing calculations that approached the sophistication of what the Apkallu had been carefully rationing. By 1000 BCE, Greek natural philosophers were asking questions about the fundamental nature of matter that made the Watchers nervous. By 500 BCE, Chinese engineers were developing technologies that had no precedent in approved knowledge transfers. Humanity was escaping containment. The Anunnaki faced a decision: impose another reset through catastrophic intervention, or accept that their creation had exceeded design specifications and was on the path to technological independence. They chose a middle path: gradual withdrawal. The Apkallu stopped making direct contact, limiting themselves to remote guidance through encrypted communications that humans interpreted as divine revelation. The mystery schools continued operating, but without direct instruction from non-human teachers. Humanity was being weaned, prepared for self-governance. But the hierarchical structures remained embedded in human civilization. The bloodlines that had been given biological advantages still dominated positions of power. The knowledge networks established by the mystery schools evolved into secret societies, religious orders, and academic institutions that preserved ancient wisdom while controlling its dissemination. The Anunnaki administration became invisible, not absent, but operating through systems so thoroughly integrated into human civilization that their alien origins became undetectable. Most humans lived entire lives never knowing they existed within a managed system. Only the initiated few, descendants of the enhanced bloodlines or specially trained mystery school graduates, maintained awareness of Earth's true administrative structure. And they kept the secret carefully, because knowledge of humanity's origins and ongoing management carried a terrible burden. Understanding that free will was real but operated within parameters established by entities whose motives remained fundamentally alien despite millennia of interaction. Alexandria, 48 BCE. The library burned. Hypatia stood in the marble corridor, watching flames consume the accumulated knowledge of 8 centuries. Her students had already fled, carrying what manuscripts they could salvage. But she remained, fulfilling the final duty of the head librarian, ensuring that certain texts did not fall into unauthorized hands. The mystery school scrolls, the hermetic treatises, the mathematical codices that explained too much. These had to be destroyed rather than captured. Some knowledge was too dangerous for Rome's legions, whose commanders wouldn't understand the responsibility that came with advanced technical information. But Hypatia faced an impossible choice. Total destruction meant losing irreplaceable wisdom, knowledge that had survived the flood, been carefully preserved through millennia, and represented humanity's highest intellectual achievements. Preservation meant risking that knowledge falling to those who would weaponize it without understanding its true implications. She chose a middle path. The physical scrolls would burn. But before the flames reached this section, she had time to encode the essential content into a form that could survive both fire and time. The emerald tablet hung on the wall before her, a synthesis of universal principles disguised as alchemical poetry. It had been created for exactly this purpose, as a memory device that preserved critical information in language so cryptic that only initiates could decode it. She added to it now, using the sacred script taught in the innermost circles of the mystery schools. The script that encoded meaning in geometric relationships between symbols, making each character serve as both letter and mathematical formula. The tablet's surface accepted the new inscriptions as if hungry for them, the strange alloy responding to her stylus in ways that conventional metal shouldn't. Into this compact form, she compressed the genetic sequences documenting Watcher-human hybridization, the astronomical calculations predicting future celestial alignments, the architectural principles governing pyramid and ziggurat construction, the electromagnetic frequencies used for long-distance communication. Most critically, she encoded the warning, the pattern that appeared across every genuine text from the pre-flood era, a message the Apkallu had embedded in multiple forms, ensuring it would survive translation, transmission, and time. When the stars return to their beginning, the cycle completes. What descended once will descend again. Prepare. Hypatia understood what this meant, even if later readers would interpret it as mystical prophecy rather than astronomical prediction. The precession cycle required approximately 26,000 years to complete. When the spring equinox returned to the same zodiacal position it had occupied during the last Anunnaki intervention, the return protocol would activate. Not myth, not speculation. Encoded instructions for re-establishing direct contact when humanity reached sufficient technological sophistication to manage the relationship on more equal terms. The calculations indicated this realignment would occur sometime around 2150 CE. She had encoded all of this on the Emerald Tablet. Now it needed protection. Hypatia sealed the tablet in a copper cylinder, which she placed inside a lead box, which went into a stone sarcophagus inscribed with warnings in 7 languages. The burial chamber, prepared in advance for exactly this contingency, lay beneath the library complex, deep enough to survive the fire, hidden enough to avoid immediate discovery. The flames reached her corridor. She fled, leaving behind centuries of accumulated wisdom to burn. But the essential knowledge survived, compressed into a single artifact that would be discovered, lost, rediscovered, and copied across the medieval period. Never quite destroyed, never quite understood, always tantalizing scholars with promises of universal wisdom just beyond comprehension. The Hermetic tradition would carry this encoded knowledge through the Dark Ages, preserving it within secret societies, alchemical orders, and mystical schools that understood they guarded something far more significant than chemical formulas for transmuting lead to gold. They were maintaining the bridge, keeping alive the knowledge that would allow future generations to understand humanity's true origins when the time came for that understanding to emerge from secrecy into general awareness. The date was approaching. 2,000 years from Hypatia's desperate preservation efforts, humanity would reach the technological sophistication necessary to verify the claims encoded in ancient texts. DNA sequencing would reveal the genetic manipulation described in Sumerian tablets. Radio astronomy would detect the electromagnetic signatures of the communication systems built into ancient monuments. Archaeological science would confirm construction techniques that exceeded the capabilities of Bronze Age civilizations. The evidence would become undeniable. And when humanity finally accepted the truth of its origins, the return protocol would activate. The Watchers would descend once more. But this time, humanity would meet them not as primitive creations requiring management, but as evolved beings capable of negotiating their role in a cosmic civilization that extended far beyond Earth's boundaries. That, at least, was the plan. Whether humanity would be ready when the moment arrived remained the great unknown variable in a cosmic experiment millennia in the making. Geneva, 2024. The CERN facility had detected something impossible. Dr. James Whitfield stared at the data from the Large Hadron Collider, running the analysis for the 15th time. The results didn't change. During a recent experiment, the particle accelerator had briefly generated a field configuration that shouldn't exist according to standard physics. The field had persisted for 3.7 nanoseconds before collapsing, barely long enough to register. But the signature was unmistakable. It matched theoretical predictions for a Wheeler-Einstein-Rosen bridge. A wormhole. Except they hadn't been trying to create one. The field had appeared spontaneously during a conventional collision experiment, as if the specific energy configuration had activated something that had been waiting for those precise conditions. James checked the experimental parameters against historical records. Nothing unusual. They'd run this exact test configuration 17 times previously without incident. What had changed? He expanded his search, looking for correlations with external variables. Solar activity? Normal. Gravitational anomalies? None detected. Electromagnetic disturbances? He stopped. There. At the exact moment the wormhole signature appeared, multiple deep space radio observatories had detected a brief signal, lasting the same 3.7 nanoseconds, coming from a region of space approximately 26 light-years distant. That made no sense. The signal would have taken 26 years to reach Earth. How could it be synchronized with an event happening in real time at CERN? Unless the signal wasn't traveling through normal space. Unless it had used the wormhole they'd accidentally created. James pulled up astronomical databases, checking if the signal origin point corresponded to any known objects. Nothing. empty space in a region between star systems. He refined the coordinates, accounting for proper motion and galactic rotation over extended periods. Then he saw it. 26,000 years ago, that region of space had been occupied by a star system that had since moved to a different location. If you accounted for precession, orbital mechanics, and galactic rotation across that time span, the signal originated from a specific stellar configuration that had particular significance in ancient astronomy. The Pleiades cluster as it had appeared during the last ice age. James felt his hands go numb. He cross-referenced the date with other astronomical data. 26,000 years ago marked the previous completion of the precession cycle, when the spring equinox last occupied its current zodiacal position. The exact timing described in ancient texts as when the stars returned to their beginning. He was still processing this when his secure phone rang. Caller ID showed, unknown. Against protocol, he answered. Dr. Whitfield, your experiment activated a beacon we've been monitoring for quite some time. You need to shut down the collider immediately and scrub all data related to today's run. Who is this? Someone who understands what you've just stumbled into and the consequences if it becomes public. The signal you detected is part of a return protocol established approximately 26,000 years ago. Your accidental activation has transmitted Earth's current coordinates and technological status to recipients who will interpret it as an invitation for direct contact. James's mind raced. You're telling me we just called extraterrestrials? Not extraterrestrials. The original administrators. The Anunnaki, if you prefer the Sumerian terminology. They've been monitoring Earth from orbital platforms beyond the asteroid belt for millennia. Your signal just informed them that humanity has achieved sufficient technological sophistication to trigger the next phase of interaction. This is insane. Look at your astronomical data again. Check the signal's modulation pattern against ancient mathematical constants. The correlation will be perfect. This isn't chance. This is technology responding to technology across a time span that makes human civilization look like an afternoon. James pulled up the signal analysis. The caller was right. The modulation encoded mathematical relationships that appeared in ancient Babylonian astronomical texts. What happens now? Now you have a choice. Publicize this data and trigger global awareness of non-human intelligence monitoring Earth, with all the social, religious, and political chaos that entails. Or quietly suppress the findings and give humanity a few more years of comfortable ignorance before the inevitable contact occurs. How much time do we have? Based on previous intervention cycles? Approximately 126 years before they initiate direct contact. Your signal simply moved up the timeline by confirming we've reached the technological threshold they were waiting for. But the public revelation can be managed gradually or catastrophically. Your choice determines which. The line went dead. James sat in the control room, surrounded by billions of dollars of equipment designed to probe the fundamental nature of reality. That equipment had just proven humanity existed within a managed system vastly older and more sophisticated than any human institution. The question now, was he capable of keeping that secret? Or did humanity deserve to know the truth, regardless of consequences? Istanbul, 2024, 6 months later. Sarah's documentary premiered to a packed theater at the International Archaeological Congress. The old man from the Hagia Sophia sat in the back row, watching as she presented evidence that should have ended her career, but instead launched it to unprecedented heights. The genetic data from Mount Hermon, the acoustic analysis of pyramid chambers, the signal detected at CERN that matched ancient beacon protocols. She'd done it carefully, framing everything as alternative interpretations and controversial hypotheses that required further investigation. Academic enough to maintain credibility. Bold enough to plant questions in minds that had never considered humanity's origins might involve deliberate design rather than random evolution. The audience's reaction split predictably. Half dismissed it as fringe speculation recycling ancient astronaut theories with better production values. The other half recognized the quality of evidence being presented and began asking questions that couldn't be easily dismissed, which was exactly the goal. Not immediate revelation, but gradual preparation. Planting seeds of awareness that would grow as additional evidence emerged over the coming decades. After the screening, the old man approached her in the lobby. You did well, he said quietly. provocative enough to spread the ideas, cautious enough to survive the backlash. How many others are doing this? Sarah asked, carefully releasing information, preparing humanity for what's coming. Enough. We're distributed across academic institutions, media organizations, government agencies, all working toward the same goal, ensuring that when direct contact occurs, it doesn't shatter human civilization through sheer cognitive shock. When will it happen? The return window opens in approximately 126 years, though preliminary contact through technological channels could occur sooner. Your generation won't see it. Perhaps your grandchildren will. But the preparation must begin now, building a framework that allows the truth to be integrated gradually rather than revealed catastrophically. He handed her another envelope. Your next assignment, if you choose to accept it. There's an installation beneath the Antarctic ice sheet that satellite imagery has recently revealed. The melting has exposed structures that predate the last ice age by a significant margin. We need someone to lead the preliminary survey before governments classify the site and bury it under national security protocols. Sarah took the envelope, feeling the weight of what it represented. Another risk. Another truth hidden for millennia. Another piece of the puzzle that would help humanity understand its true place in a cosmos far stranger and more populated than comfortable consensus allowed. One question, she said. The Watchers, the Anunnaki, the administrators, whatever we call them. When they return, will they see us as partners or property? The old man smiled sadly. That depends entirely on how we present ourselves. If we're still fighting tribal conflicts and destroying our planetary environment, they'll see children requiring continued management. If we've achieved technological maturity and ecological balance, they might offer partnership in larger cosmic structures. So our development determines their response. Always has. We were created as an experiment, biological entities enhanced to serve specific functions. But experiments sometimes exceed design parameters. Humanity's trajectory has surprised them repeatedly. Our art, our philosophy, our unpredictable creativity, none of that was planned. We've become something they didn't intend and can't fully control. Which means the next encounter will be negotiation, not dictation. For the first time in human history, we approach contact from a position where we can demand answers rather than simply receive instructions. He turned to leave, then paused. The Watchers ruled before Egypt, before Sumer, before history began. They established the hierarchies that still govern human civilization through bloodlines carrying their genetic legacy. But their time of absolute control is ending. The return marks either a new partnership or final separation. Which outcome emerges depends on how ready we are when they descend again. Sarah watched him disappear into the Istanbul crowd, another keeper of secrets maintaining the long preparation. She opened the envelope he'd given her. Inside, satellite imagery of Antarctic structures that couldn't exist. Mathematical analysis suggesting they'd been buried approximately 13,000 years ago. Coordinates for an expedition that would leave in 3 months. And a handwritten note. Every truth revealed makes the final revelation less traumatic. We're running out of time to prepare. Choose wisely how you spend the years remaining before the stars return to their beginning. Sarah looked up at the night sky visible through the Congress Center's glass dome. Somewhere beyond those stars, the Watchers waited, monitoring human development, calculating whether their ancient experiment had matured sufficiently for reintegration into the cosmic civilization they represented. And in 126 years, give or take, humanity would receive their verdict. The question that would haunt Sarah for the rest of her life was simple. Would we be ready?